To recap, if dissociation is consistently implemented as a coping mechanism for traumatic experiences in early life, before ages 6 to 9, when the personality is fully formed, this can lead to the development of many defined senses of self, maintained by dissociation. This is known as dissociative identity disorder, or the closely related, otherwise specified dissociative disorder. Theories of psychic fragmentation, structural dissociation of the personality. I find the theory of structural dissociation of the personality useful when trying to conceptualize psychic fragmentation into different parts. This theory is outlined in the text, The Haunted Self, Structural Dissociation and the Treatment of Chronic Traumatization. This text explains that children aren't born with an integrated personality. In the absence of trauma, a child will integrate one coherent self over time as their brain matures and becomes capable of supporting this integration. Dissociative identity disorder is the result of one sense of self and self-history failing to integrate due to trauma. Trauma that's interpersonal, involves caregivers, begins at a younger age, is more severe, lasts for longer, and isn't properly acknowledged, is more likely to interfere with a child's integrative capacity and so to cause dissociative identity disorder. Once an individual has one sufficiently integrated sense of self, this process can't be reversed and the individual can't develop DID. According to structural dissociation, human beings are not born with a unified personality. Rather, infants operate based upon a collection of different ego states which handle different needs, like attachment to a caregiver, feeding, and exploring the world around them. Rather than possessing a fluid emotional range within one integrated personality, an infant's experience of emotions is disintegrated. Infants possess 4 biological determinants, emotional systems that control anger, pleasure, sadness, and fear, and switch between these emotional systems. It is for this reason that a baby may transition rapidly between seemingly opposite states, like switching from crying to laughing. In healthy development, an infant's separate emotional systems and ego states gradually integrate over the first 6 to 9 years of life. Integration of the personality occurs through attachment and emotional connection with others, and acceptance of life experiences. As a young child experiences life and relational attachments, their separate emotional systems of anger, pleasure, sadness, and fear are accessed. As they experience life, their emotional systems are repeatedly employed alongside their ego states as they are compelled to act, to attach, explore, and play. By being accessed simultaneously, a young child's biological determinants, emotional systems, and ego states combine to form action systems. Therefore, after infancy and pre-integration, a child's psyche is composed of what are known as action systems, emotional and behavioral systems. These separate action systems are increasingly called to act in tandem as life experiences become more complex with developmental level. And as a child ages, they experience increasingly complex life tasks and emotions simultaneously. In a secure environment, the psyche will gradually integrate these experiences. Eventually, given opportunity, these action systems will integrate into one singular personality. In summary, if a child does not experience significant trauma to compel dissociation, the psyche will naturally integrate. Through a process of experiencing life and relational attachments, the psyche's separate action systems learn to coexist and work together. As this process continues, the psyche's action systems learn to share experiences, at which point they become integrated into a single, unified personality. Once these systems are integrated, a unified personality is formed. This entails the psychic integration of the ability to perform daily life tasks alongside the ability to experience emotions. A singular self is achieved when a child's psychic systems have developed into a unified system, one that can handle the various tasks and emotions encountered throughout life in a unified way. If a child experiences significant trauma before integration of emotions or action systems, their psyche may fail to integrate into one singular personality. Instead of forming one singular personality, those with psychic fragmentation form many separate personalities. Consider a mirror that is shattered. Even though it could have been unified if not fragmented, each shard is now separate and reflects a different image. When the psyche remains fragmented and dissociated, the separate parts develop personalities of their own. If the psyche remains fragmented due to trauma, it develops into dissociated parts. some of which handle the awareness of traumatic experiences, and some of which handle tasks of daily life. The general division between parts that hold trauma memories and parts that attend to daily life tasks is psychologically adaptive. It prevents overwhelming emotions from hindering the ability to attend to the actions of daily life. That is, psychic fragmentation is effective at least while dissociation is maintained. In the theory of structural dissociation of the personality, psychic parts responsible for awareness of trauma and parts responsible for the maintenance of daily life are differentiated by the labels emotional part and apparently normal part. Emotional parts, or EPs, hold traumatic memories and are often stuck in the sensory experience of the memory and unaware of the passage of time since the traumatic event. Alternately, apparently normal parts, ANPs, may be either emotionally disconnected from or amnesic for past traumatic experiences, and instead attend to the necessary tasks of life. In terms of the spectrum of psychic fragmentation, apparently normal parts and emotional parts distribution differs between types of systems. Systems of psychic fragmentation involved in cases of simple PTSD, complex PTSD, and borderline personality disorder possess only one ANP and one or many EPs. OSDD systems, which are similar to DID but lack certain diagnostic criteria, usually have one ANP, although may have more, and multiple EPs. And a DID system will possess multiple ANP and EPs. The emotional parts involved in OSDD and DID are more differentiated compared to those involved in PTSD, CPTSD, and borderline personality disorder, meaning that they possess an individual sense of self. To note, some systems may have apparently normal parts that classify as a mix of apparently normal and emotional parts. Structural dissociation and the spectrum of psychic fragmentation. To briefly explain the relation between PTSD, CPTSD, and DID simply. All involve psychic fragmentation. I conceptualize psychic fragmentation as being on a spectrum. Imagine simple PTSD on the left side of the spectrum. Simple PTSD involves a single dissociated part from a single traumatic experience, and this part holds emotions and sensory experiences, but not a different individual sense of self. Therefore, individuals with simple PTSD still possess one singular sense of self. They just have an undefined emotional part, also known as a fragment, that is split off from conscious awareness. This splitting involves dissociation, and flashbacks can cause an individual to feel as if they are transported to the past. However, even in flashbacks, the overall sense of self is retained. Individuals with simple PTSD generally do not experience symptoms of psychic fragmentation like identity confusion or alteration. Around the middle of the spectrum, complex PTSD and personality disorders like borderline personality disorder. These conditions involve multiple dissociated parts, but these parts are also undefined, meaning they hold emotions and sensations but without possessing a different individual sense of self. Therefore, individuals with complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder still possess one singular sense of self. However, that overall self has many undefined parts split off, and so is still fragmented. These conditions can lead to experiences of identity confusion. They may feel a vague sense of I'm me but different. Individuals may experience having different modes or self-states. To note, having different modes is an experience common to everybody. For example, we act differently at work than at home. But this sense of operating in modes can be more pronounced in those with CPTSD or borderline personality disorder, and lead to greater identity confusion. However, these individuals with CPTSD or BPD will not experience severe identity alteration or dissociative amnesia between parts. On the right of the spectrum of psychic fragmentation, imagine severe dissociative disorders, like dissociative identity disorder and OSDD. Dissociative identity disorder involves multiple dissociated parts, like CPTSD, yet the parts involved in DID are more defined. The dissociated parts in DID possess their own separate sense of self. An individual with DID does not have one unified sense of self. Rather, they possess multiple senses of self held within one psyche. Similar to CPTSD, DID still involves some parts called fragments that hold emotions and sensations without possessing a defined, separate sense of self. Because DID involves many senses of self, Those with DID experience intense identity confusion and identity alteration, along with dissociative amnesia between parts, in addition to symptoms of CPTSD. In this episode, I have discussed dissociative identity disorder in terms of the theory of structural dissociation of the personality. In the next section, I will discuss psychic fragmentation in terms of internal family systems and Carl Jung's theory of psychic archetypes and the structure of the psyche shared across humanity. I hope you found this information useful, and thank you very much for listening.